Hello everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to be talking about just how slow INFJs are, but how in fact INFJs are not really slow. They come across as slow thinkers, but they are not really slow thinkers. So how can we explain that? How can we make sense of that? Do we agree with this? Do we not agree with this? In what way are INFJs slow? Are they actually super fast and sharp and all of this is a bunch of nonsense? I think that we're not going to get an answer unless we dig a little deeper. So if you're interested in this video, just stick around. Keep in mind that I have written a book on the INFJ personality called The Ecstatic Soul. So if you would like to have deeper insight into this very interesting type, check the links below and get a copy, right? And in fact, INFJs in fiction. Apparently the main character of my novel, The Infinite Castle, which you can see here, which is also in a weird way a kind of prequel to my new book, which you'll understand better when you're introduced to the new book. Rumor has it the main character is an INFJ. If you're into Kafka, Dostoevsky, Camus and all these people, check it out. And that supports the channel. You know what supports the channel as well? It's to support me on Patreon, guys. There's a link below, anywhere from €3 a month. The addition of your support is of great help, you know, for keeping things going. So I'm very grateful to my subscribers, old and new. Okay, so INFJs. First of all, there might be some among you who are thinking, no, INFJs aren't slow. What are you talking about? Now, perhaps you're new to the personality community. Perhaps you're currently experimenting with the INFJ type for yourself and you're trying to figure out whether that is your type. But the fact of the matter is, INFJs, if you know them well, they're not the most rapid fire articulators, speakers. They're not the most eloquent, at least in the first instance. And in this respect, they probably suffer from the comparison with, say, extroverted perceivers, right? So NE dominance and SE dominance. They also suffer from the comparison with extroverted judgers, FE dominant and TE dominant. This is not so surprising at one level because extroversion, being directed toward the object in your essential relationship to the world, means that you're going to have a quicker path to articulating the relationship with the object. Because when you speak, you're communicating with an audience, so you're reaching outside yourself. If you're communicating with an audience about them or about objects that you have, you know, common experience with them, if you like, the circuit is just a quicker one to actually drive through than if you have to go through an internal process. So in the sense, you could make videos also for why, say, TI dominance, such as INTPs and ISTPs are, you know, come across like they're not fast thinkers, but, you know, aren't, right? Like they are, at least there certainly can be fast thinkers among them. Interestingly, the difference between TI dominant and NI dominant in terms of how they come across in articulation is a little bit different. They don't come across as articulate and rapid fire as so many dominance and TE dominance and so on. But whereas what I would say about the INFJ is that they're slow but steady. Whereas often what you'll notice with INTPs and ISTPs is that it's not so much that they are slow, but they tend to be a little bit more stop-start, you know, in their elocution, because TI has a tendency, as you know, to always want to like reconstruct and systematize, and it also does that in real time, which can affect your level of articulation. We're not going to be interested in TI leads here. We're going to be specifically interested in INFJs. So the fact of the matter is that INFJs have this reputation among a lot of people of being slow thinkers. So there's two things that I want to tackle, to challenge and hopefully to overturn this conception, which I think is a completely wrong conception. First of all, like what needs to be dismantled is this idea that thinking is synonymous with speaking, or to be more precise, that reflecting and thinking is synonymous with articulating. This is something that we, especially in the West, automatically assume. That is to say that if you're dealing with someone who's a very quick articulator of language, you automatically, very spontaneously think that they think fast. Whereas if you're dealing with someone who's not a very fast articulator, you will automatically be assuming that this person, thinks slowly, does not think very fast. Maybe their thinking is a little bit clouded for various possible reasons like this. So there's this important point that we need to make, that thinking is distinct from articulating. Now, it is true that there is a link between the two, and that if you're someone who articulates things very quickly, say like Russell Brand, it's a very good example of someone who has rapid fire articulation. There's many others like him. Ben Shapiro comes to mind as well. And he's not an NE dominant, he's, a T dominant. Well, no doubt in a certain sense they do think fast. But there's more senses to the word thinking than just this ability to quickly be able to bring to the word what's in your mind. INFJs are not fast thinkers in this sense. They are fast thinkers in terms of bringing insights that they have from within, if you like, the ferment of their introverted perception, so in their case, NI dominant, and linking it with events in the real world, such that those events, as they experience them in the real world, can be enriched in the way that these events are described by the prior insights from introverted intuition. And if you follow my videos, or if you've read Jung, or if you read my previous book, The Ecstatic Soul, that introverted intuition for an INFJ, when you're like bathing in this pool of introverted intuition, is always a way of being in connection with the primordial archetypes. And archetypes are, as I like to say these days, hyper-condensed concretions of world experiences of our species across unimaginably vast swaths of time, which gives INFJs the peculiar wisdom that they have. So even though they're often not described as fast thinkers, they're often described as wise thinkers. Why do they come across as wise thinkers? Well, they come across as wise thinkers precisely because when they do articulate, they seem to always be connected to time out of mind, age-old themes. This is the direct influence of the archetype when it has been able to creep into the articulation of the INFJ regarding events that may very well have to do with everyday affairs that are contemporary, whether they are politically contemporary, philosophically contemporary, or just everyday normal stuff, discussions you have with other people, with your friends or with some acquaintances. So in a sense, the INFJ is very good at bringing those archetypal influences into their description of everyday events. Gives the timeless or a kind of eternal, very kind of far back into the past, reaching into the future kind of texture to the way that they articulate things. Also explains why it takes them some time to articulate things, because as you probably know, the archetype being, as Jung likes to say, not a sign, not a word, but a symbol, this concrete concatenation of content, it's by definition not transparent. It's not transparent in the way that you can describe a concept that you're familiar with, or the name for an object, like this object or that object, or the concept of, communication or cognition, or the concept of house. It can be whatever concept you want. The archetype is not a concept, it's a concretion by definition that makes it kind of elusive. It's very hard to speak an archetype. INFJs have to think fast in order to delineate ways in which they can bring this archetype to some form of linguistic articulation. So, if you like, there's not a direct word to object articulation, which will make it seem, if that happens, as if the person thinks very fast. But that's because there's an intermediate step, which is to say the object is experienced, but before it is spoken, before the event is spoken, it has to be analyzed and seen through the perspective or the grid of the archetype and its own qualities. And that process, even if you think fast, is still going to take a long time to deliver because the archetype is not transparent to reason, right? So that's why INFJs can be fast thinkers, but that will never culminate in them being very fast articulators. Their articulation just has to go through that NI process of figuring out how the archetype lines up with the experience of a particular event, object, person, and so on and so forth. The payoff is that when that is expressed, usually there is that element of age-old wisdom. Well, in the best cases, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but in the best cases, you really see that at play. You see that in great artists, great writers, great intellectuals. There's always that extra step, but that extra step still requires a lot of thinking. It's just thinking that is not immediately visible. It's not thinking that is immediately transparent. And here we're back to this idea that particularly in the West, and that has philosophical roots among other things, but in the West, we tend to associate reason and thinking with reason, rational thinking, with transparency. Right? Everything has to be transparent. That's how you can validate a particular statement or particular argument as something that is rational, as a product of legitimate and sound thinking. That's why we tend to not take into account that intermediate step of reckoning with the influence of the archetype for an NI dominant, because that reckoning is not within the sphere of transparency. So this is something that the West has neglected. And in fact, the ramifications of this are very important, because it is in this realm that you get most of the prophetic insights, most of the spiritual insights. In other words, all the things that in the Western secularized world, we tend to relegate a little bit into oblivion. It can be revived, but that also has to go through a reappreciation of the fact that INFJs are fast thinkers in their own way. It's not the way of extroverted users, but it's still fundamental. Okay, let me know in the comments what you thought, guys, and give me a like if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next at the weekend. Take care.